There's some amount of informed clairvoyance that's required to have long-term speed and not just short-term speed.
Making sure we're maximizing every single sprint so that we're not building too far ahead, maximizing the leverage we can have at any moment.
Product velocity, that's the thing that has been talked about by all the speakers today. But the other thing as well is how you're building the noise war, getting attention on social.
Are we making sure that we're able to make our previous workflows a lot more efficient, staying on top of the latest tools, gadgets, and amazing things that are cropping up every single day that allow us to work faster in a way that we couldn't previously?
We have Daksh, who's the co-founder and CEO of Greptile, which is the AI-powered code review platform. He just launched. He's a big advocate for shipping quickly. We also have Evan, who's the co-founder and CEO of Glue. We are going to find where Evan is in 1 second. And then we have Ray, who's the founder and CEO of Atria. Ray is an AI-powered marketing platform. Atria is an AI-powered marketing platform. Ray, before this, spent time building product and strategy for TikTok. And then we have Yen, who just joined 15.5, and they sold their previous startup, Kona, and this previous startup was building AI assistant for managers and AI coaches. So we'll dive into that conversation. We're going to kick off with like a very basic and simple question, which is, what does AI speed mean to you, and how do you keep up with it?
It's a good question. I think we're still trying to figure out what AI speed means for us. Things are moving so fast that we're just constantly having to reevaluate. Like, are we doing the right things? Are we applying the right techniques and technologies? An example of this is a friend of mine who's starting a company to help evaluate demo videos and turn it into documentation. So you could just record a demo video and then this Kestra looks like a great idea. It's like is every member of our team actually properly taking advantage of the tools we're building collectively to move as fast as we can? And the answer is, for us, we're constantly having to adjust every week. So I think that's what it means for us. It's sort of, are we re-architecting our processes and how we approach kind of every stage and every part of the company.
And the other interesting thing I would like to double click into this is, you guys were founded pre the GPT moment, and quickly iterating and evolving, especially in an enterprise product. I think would love some insights and anecdotes into how did that come to be?
Yeah, exactly. So when we started Glue, this is a team chat app, or we're thinking of it now as an AI era, because actually when we first started Glue, we were really focused on human efficiency. How can we create work chat that is really efficient for people? And then when ChatGPT was announced, we realized, well, a lot of the same ideas are actually inherent in AI understanding of text and getting job done in a fray. It's all very similar concepts. And so we very quickly started kind of merging all these ideas together. And then, but at the same time, we've still got just a bunch of foundational table stakes features we need to build out for enterprise. Like you said, I mean, we're building directory sync and SSO and, it's kind of a bunch of standard stuff. So how do we prioritize, and how do we figure out where we put our efforts? And it's challenging, but we'll definitely go into it here in a few minutes, I'm sure, a little bit more. But I think for us, it's all about making sure we're maximizing every single cycle, every single sprint, so that we're not building too far ahead and really just maximizing the leverage we can have at any moment. Yeah.
I love that answer. Can folks hear me in the back, by the way? I just want to make sure. Okay, sweet. So what does AI speed mean? I think there's two things. Speed, like AI literacy. Essentially, are our teams literate in using AI to scale what was previously unscalable? Are we maximizing different types of processes? Are we making sure that we're able to make our previous workflows a lot more efficient and staying on top of the latest tools, gadgets, and amazing things that are cropping up every single day, Adaline included, that allow us to work faster in a way that we couldn't previously? The other one is speed of learning, which was mentioned a lot in the previous panels. I would add a small asterisk next to it. It's not just learning anything, it's learning what good looks like. I think that's the hardest part when it comes to AI. Understanding what that, if it's not deterministic, understanding what that end state should look like is the hardest question to answer as you're trying to build. You don't know if you're moving in the right direction, period. And so the faster we can figure out what those early signals are, the faster we'll be able to actually fulfill the dreams that we have with AI.
Yeah, the way I think about AI speed is slightly different from, I think, the way the panelists have really focused on today. I think the obvious thing in the room is like, obviously you want to be shipping faster, right? I think Formula One is kind of a good analogy where we're trying to shave off every second that you get into getting that car into, like, of course, the routes. But the way I think about it is like, what is the holy trinity for speed, like AI speed? It's going to be product velocity, right? So that's the thing that has been talked about by all the speakers today. But the other thing as well is noise. So how you're building the noise war, right? So getting attention on social. What this looks like in our company's example is that I have a full ghostwriting team that is just posting for me on LinkedIn every day. Every day, from Monday to Friday, I'm always on people's feeds so that when we do put out that product out, people see it first and front and center in their LinkedIn profiles, right? And then the last one is the talent one, right? So we know the product, everyone's been very focused on the product, but the talents is the third dimension, which is like how are you attracting the best talents to go and increase that velocity, but at a higher quality rate. And I think the nuance that I'm seeing that's happening right now is because there's the Lovables, the Cursors of the world that have just completely dropped the bar for what is like a good shipment, right? That there is an area for customers, like there's a craving for customers to see us to interact with a software experience that has high quality, right? At a level where it's served the base table stakes at a really high bar and it ships really fast.
I guess now. Hi, I'm Daksh. I'm one of the co-founders of Greptile. So we do autonomous agents that review pull requests. So I spend a lot of time thinking about speed when it comes to internal operations. And I think a very underappreciated risk vector is picking the wrong patterns, and you get a lot of short-term velocity out of it, but you abandon long-term velocity. So I went to school at Georgia Tech. It's a technical school in the South. And Georgia Tech was one of the first schools to have RFID locks on doors. So you could use your school ID card to go into doors. And importantly, they adopted it very early. And so later on, when NFC became the new standard, a lot of other schools like Clemson, which is not a technical school, didn't have an engineering program until 2009, actually allowed you to open doors with your iPhone. At Georgia Tech, because it's invested so heavily in this old RFID technology, does not let you use your iPhone to unlock doors. And there are many examples of things you can do today which would lock you into bad patterns. A general example could be if you were using integration platforms last year for agents that were somewhat bespoke, and then in November, MCP became the authoritative way in which we interact with external apps, then you sort of locked yourself into, and integrations are actually such a precious example because, by their nature, you probably invested very heavily in creating this webwork of integrations that you now have to kind of rework from scratch. So I think there's some amount of informed clairvoyance that's required to have long-term speed and not just short-term speed, and especially when the priors of the game change so bigly.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Like the long-term speed matched with the short-term speed is the hardest part of figuring out like what are the portfolio bets that I'm making, right? But at the same time, shipping on a weekly cadence.
These are really, really great points. And I would love to like just double click into the larger level question of we have people here, leaders from companies who are building AI-powered products and features. What does that iteration process for that AI agent or for that AI product or for that AI feature look like inside of the company? And from two perspectives. What does that look like from a workflow standpoint? Meaning this is how we iterate and ship a change to a prompt. But also, what does that look like from a team standpoint? Who in your team gets involved in that process? How do they get involved? How do you interface with customers?
Yeah, I'll just start with this one. So For us, our product is not an AI product at its core. It wasn't only started. I think it's shifting that direction now. But we've been very intentional to think about AI and how it works in our product in kind of two different ways. One is, how can AI improve our user experience in kind of a seamless way that people aren't necessarily having to think about? They're not consciously thinking, I'm using AI and I'm worried about if this is going to work. It just kind of happens, and it kind of takes away some of the busy work that you might, not want to deal with. And so these are things that we, especially for very design heavy or UX heavy product, we just kind of work into our core product development process, and how our designers are thinking about this, and our engineers are suggesting things, and then we're trying it. If it works really well, it needs to work most of the time. It needs to be one of those 90% or 95% success rate cases. Then we're just shipping it, and we're measuring to see, is this working the way we thought it would? And, it kind of just goes as part of our product development workflow. The other category, of course, are AI features that are definitely more on the early adopter edge, and, are maybe failing 30% of the time, and are things that we're using internally, but not all of our users are going to really get the kind of value they might expect. I think for our mainstream user base, they're kind of expecting AI is just this magic powder that if they ask a question, it's going to answer anything they want to know, because it just doesn't work like that, right? As we talked about today. So we really had to be intentional about, and we're letting our team just try this stuff. Like, build something. We're using Glue internally, of course, to build Glue. And so we're constantly building these things and trying them ourselves. And we have feature flags and shipping them as quickly as we can. But we have to be really careful about how we roll it out to users, and pick the right users to do it, get the feedback from them, and then kind of, as that matures and evolves, and we can feel confident in a broader rollout. So we're really careful about differentiating what kind of feature we're working on, and then changing our workflow depending on that complexity. Yeah.
I love that answer. My experience is split in half, so I'll address both. Prior to getting acquired by 15.5, I was a founder for 5 years. Right in college at UCLA, we basically started Kona, obsessed with managers and how we can make them more successful. Then it took 5 years essentially to figure out what case study we were essentially building for. The previous panel was talking a lot about product market fit. The amount of iterations, there were 5 pivots involved with that. We did not get it in the first 3 years, mind you. It was literally in the last 7 months prior to acquisition that we really started to make the pieces sing together. Throughout all of this, the thing that was telling us that we were going in the wrong direction was essentially customers. And we were really, really obsessed with customers from day one. To this point, you shouldn't usually take manager advice from a 25-year-old. I wouldn't recommend it. But if that 25-year-old has been talking to 3,000 managers and has been obsessed with this and studying it nonstop, that's a person that's at least done a little bit of homework. So we had to become the founders that actually could build this product in the flow of things. That level of customer obsession was the only way we were able to actually get that last pivot to work. When we got to 15.5, things were a little bit nicer, but the thing that we needed to figure out was actually how to get the AI to do what we could already see glimmers of. And so we were finally iterating on that front. But then figuring out what good looks like on that front, there are so many AI coaches out there. There are plenty of folks that can set up a custom GPT right now and deliver leadership coaching. What is the output there? What format in that output would actually get a manager to be a better boss to you? It's a big philosophical question. It's been something I've been hammering my head around for 5 years. Trying to answer that question was essentially 7 weeks of constant iteration. 7 weeks is generous. It was 5 years plus 7 weeks to try to iterate and make sure that the prompts were delivering. And we were literally shipping prompts daily to try to get the output, testing it out with a set of early access customers that we had at 15.5 before we were ready to say, this is ready for the rest of the user base here. So there's kind of 2 answers. Figure out your AI, but more importantly, figure out your product. The latter is probably the hardest to figure out.
Yeah, there have been 2 things. So just give you context. I run a marketing automation startup. Essentially, a customer would come in and integrate their ad accounts from the large platforms like Meta, TikTok, YouTube, and essentially get insights and recommendations, and we go and generate those ad creatives. There's been 2 huge unlocks in terms of our team's performance. So one is we have more than 2,000 paying customers right now, and probably like 10,000 paying team members inside the platform, and we still don't have a single account executive at the company. So I'm taking all of those calls, and that's to the point of I want to make sure that among my competitors, I have an unmatched level of customer obsession, understanding of what's going on in terms of the larger environment, such that in the sort of long-term speaking that you're playing, you're under the pulse of what's all the shipping dynamics. And it goes back to the point that Gaurav was mentioning in the previous panel, who is an advisor at Atria as well, is that if you're there at that moment when they start the onboarding journey, they will come and tell you right away when something is not good enough. And that sort of feedback loop that you bake in from that personal touch when you bring a customer on pays huge dividends in terms of knowing what to iterate upon. And then the second thing is, once we decide what to iterate upon, one huge unlock, which is ironic because I used to be a product manager at TikTok, but I've ensured that there will be no product managers at my company. And the reason for that is because we want to ensure that the people pushing the pixels on Figma are at the level of degree of understanding what are each things that I place there with a strategic thought as well. So it used to be that you would have a product manager write the PRD doc, lay out the business goals, the strategy, and then outlay it to the designer. And they would have one layer of abstraction from knowing, why am I doing this, right? But if the designer, him or herself, is the one actually curating that experience, doing all the competitor research, coming up with all the business goals, they're going to be pretty high conviction on what V1, V2, V3, V4, V5 is going to look like. And in that way, we skip a lot of the communication costs that I observed in my previous companies, including TikTok, which is probably the fastest shipping company in the world, right? Like and that's what I realized essentially is what made TikTok so effective at shipping features is because the high level like generals that you would often associate at being at the highest level were foot soldiers. They were there in the weeds, and it was insane where I would do a PRD review with a leader that was like 3 levels up above me, and he would get to the granularity of like what that workflow should look like and all the edge cases. And in that sense, that gives a very clear sense of what to iterate upon.
Oh, I think this works now. It does? Okay, yeah. Okay. I think an interesting anti-pattern that I've noticed with AI app builders is using evals too early. And I think that there's a more Pareto efficient way of getting there, which is if your app in some capacity surfaces the LLM's output to a user, which in our case, our bot leaves comments on pull requests, so naturally there are LLM tokens that were surfacing the users, not true for every app, but it is in our case. You should just look at it. And if it looks dumb, you don't need evals to tell you that it looks dumb. And then if it looks fine to you, you should show it to 10 users. And if it looks dumb to like 4 of them, you now know what to fix. You should keep iterating from that perspective. And then there's going to be a point at which it's no longer feasible to rely on users telling that your app is dumb and it doesn't scale anymore. And at some point, you also don't want to find out through annoying people how to fix, what parts of your product are broken. And that's a good place for bringing it out. But I think you go a very, very long way just from like Rick Rubin style front iteration. Just like look at it, and if it looks bad, you should fix it. I think that's a sort of like there do things that don't scale version of like modern AI Apple. And a lot of classically trained engineers, I think, had this methodical approach which involves, of course, we're going to have a probabilistic piece in our app. There needs to be some way to evaluate it before we ever put it out. And I see where that comes from. Maybe that's a good strategy for farther down. I think at first it should be very tasteful.
Adding to that, because I love that point, essentially, sometimes that if you essentially create an eval too early, you actually might cap out at maybe 70% good. Is the unfortunate truth. And so if we are able to actually have that output surface to the user, especially if it's a very creative output that you're trying to do, you might learn a lot by something that you wouldn't immediately register as good. There's different variations that you can essentially compare against each other. I love that point.
I feel like this is something that came up in the previous panels as well, where evals are really good for preventing regression, but they're not really the North Star metric or how you build the product. And from that point, right, like I feel like if evals are the safeguard in a way that we have on the product, generally kind of naturally lends to the question of what else can you do to to iterate really quickly. We're deploying prompts every single day. We all ship things on Friday, hoping that nothing would break in production on a Friday night. What do you do to consistently keep shipping in the world of LLMs while still maintaining good customer experience, reliability? Like you did end up putting out bad things for customers, right? So how do you balance that? Where is that knob and how do you control for it?
So this is a little specific to us, but I think it kind of goes back to what you introduced the whole afternoon, and that is that I think domain experts are the best people to evaluate and iterate on products, and so we're lucky and kind of intentionally that we use our own product every single day constantly, and so we're actually, and this is something I should recommend every team to do if you can. We always run Ming, of course, and so internally we're just constantly using what people are merging all day long, and so of course we want to get to continuous deployment and shipping as quickly as we can, but we're intentionally usually about a day behind production, and so we just cache a ton of stuff constantly, and it's not even breaking stuff. It's sort of like, oh, this doesn't look as good as it did yesterday. It just kind of feels off, and so we're kind of our own evals in that way, constantly seeing what's a little bit wrong or what we think we can do a little bit better. And we just encourage that across the team. Okay, if something feels off, if you think something can be better, just jump in and fix it, make it better. So that's how we, I think, can move a lot more quickly than we could even though we only recently added evals, actually. So I feel a little better about that. I've been feeling kind of terrible that we're really behind, but I think partly we got away with it because we were able to just use it ourselves. Yeah.
Best evals.
Feature flags, make sure you're not having every single user touch product, especially at 15.5, where I believe there are 30,000 managers that we have access to. We don't want to deliver an untested experience to them, especially with something as sensitive as coaching, which could coach them in the wrong direction, God forbid. So feature flags, we had early adopters that were very, very generous with their time, managers that were super excited to get coaching that would ping me in Slack, would hop on Zoom calls with me and be like, I didn't like this coaching tip. It seems really harsh. I tried my best in this meeting and you're yelling at me. Why? Adorable. Also, different types of dog fooding. Kona is a dog, so if you know that, it's kind of a weird pun, but essentially making sure that every single manager at your company essentially is using it. Thankfully, 15.5 has managers. The CTO is constantly screenshotting the coaching that he receives and being like, I didn't like this. I love this. For 5 weeks to hear your boss's boss tell you that the product that he's experiencing is not doing a good job is a little bit harsh, but as soon as it started to be like, this is consistently good, it was very worth the daily iteration on that front.
Yeah, that's a great point. Toby Lukka has this great article about how trust acts almost like a battery, right? And when you have a relationship with someone and you're meeting them for the first time, you're probably at 50% base levels of that trust battery being charged. So what we do at our company is we counterintuitively are extremely slow, painstakingly slow in figuring out what are the inputs in terms of the table stakes that matter when it comes to covering the surface area where we can cop and get the trust of the customer. Essentially, when we ship out that minimum lovable version of the product, if we cover that area and we do that so well, we have so many sort of charging moments to kind of lose, and still the customer will trust us, right? So in terms of the inputs that we think about at the company, we do a lot of customer calls, especially because I'm at front of the onboarding experience. I get an opportunity every day to have at least 2 customer research calls when someone's coming in to be like, hey, by the way, we're thinking about this new feature. What do you think about it? And from that, we're able to create a sense of what is truly table stakes such that we can make the mistakes. And once we do, then the other thing, once we cover that area, we then figure out what is the minimum marketable aspect of these features so that if it's that thing that they're willing to talk about, right, that's the thing worth shipping, right? And so from there on, we essentially ship as fast as we can because we know that even if we make 3 or 4 mistakes here and there, the reliability or trust factor is not going to significantly reduce.
I think on a related note, one of the things we've been experimenting with recently, which has been working well, is so Pocahontas is a very, very small team, we're 8 people, and every engineer essentially owns the entire life cycle of the feature that they built. And so, for example, Vashant is my co-founder, was recently working on the features around memory. So essentially letting Greptile learn rules about your code base and about the things that you care about in coursing from other people's comics. And he first spent about a week walking around San Francisco, meeting with all of our customers, prospective customers, just VPs, CTOs, staff engineers, senior engineers, junior engineers that we know in the city, and just sitting with them for 20 minutes at a time, trying to figure out how they currently do rule enforcement, style guides, and all this other stuff. He came back extremely energized and built the first version of his product, the second version of his product, over the course of 2 weeks, launched it, and then scheduled an onboarding call with every single one of those people that he talked to, say, we just put this out, can I onboard you on a Zoom call? Learned a ton over the course of that week, onboarding 10 people a day, and then went back and did it again. And I think that there's a couple of things. One, communication is lossy, and having the entire life cycle of a product and its feedback and what users think about it through one person's head is very valuable. And second, if you successfully assemble a team of very smart people, they actually don't need extrinsic motivation for them to build things. They just need to genuinely believe that the thing they're doing truly matters. And there's nothing that tells you if you're doing really matters when you look at your customer, who as a company are designed to serve, and they tell you the thing that they care about. You need no further conviction. And having that conviction transferred to another person, like a product manager, for even coming through me, is just not the same thing. First, when you're talking to people and like, I have met today 20 people that are going to be really excited if I fix this and show it to them text me. And I think that's sort of underrated. I think the same people with different levels of conviction and motivation can accomplish far more in weeks than if they didn't have that motivation. I think that that's something that should be sort of built into the way that people products, at least at this stage.
I love that point because it has nothing to do with AI. And it's so true across whatever you're doing. Like if you're an artist, if you're an engineer, whatever you are, like be very straight to the source. And I think there is something to also have the context in one head, and communication is always lossy. I feel like we covered a lot in this panel and a lot of different ground on how to iterate quickly, how to think about evals, how to think about teams, how do we transition from like a pre-GPT era into the GPT era, and then kind of still added value to customers. And with that, I would love to open for like a few questions into the audience before we move on to our next panel. And the questions around how to structure teams, how to think about iterating quickly, any questions of that dimension? This is the post-afternoon slump, so people need a few cups of coffee. Please go for it.
So kind of curious, I'm taking a founder was that's why I was at the so we're coming as coach. I'm curious for as you're iterating on your product, how you prioritize like different customer demands, because there are so many prospective and current customers, and there are so many features that we only have limited resources built something. So yeah.
Just to repeat the question was, how do you prioritize customer demands? Because there are a lot of them.
Yeah, for us, it's a little bit on the simpler side than perhaps most companies. We are our first customer. So Atria was born out of our own failure. We couldn't figure out marketing. So we have to ensure the product is better every day in order for us to never fail again, right? So essentially, that's how we know, is that we use the product every day. And so we have an intuition in terms of what is actually going to matter in terms of what all the different kind of customer feedback that we get. What we've learned over time is the customer is not always right? There's a lot of things that they'll tell you that they'll need, but isn't actually solving the core problem. So effectively what we do is before we launch out any sort of the larger surface area, the thing I call the table stakes aspect, we put a prototype out there in front of the customer, and we'll at least speak with 10 different prospects or customers and say, hey, look, this is what we're about to launch. These are the different criterias. What if we took this out? What if we took this out? And from that trade-off questions, you get all the unearthing of what actually matters. Because if I said, hey, if I take these two things out in terms of the prototype, would you still use it? You'll often get a very binary answer of yes or no. And that's how we do the quick discovery in terms of what actually matters.
We have sort of a less sophisticated version of the same thing, which is when a user tells us a feature request on the call, we ask them, how much do you actually care? And oftentimes they're like, not that much. They just think it's a cool idea or it's neat, but they don't really care that you built it. And then we just take the total volume of how much they care times number of people who would care about this based on what we know about the priors of why they care in the first place. And then we weigh it by size of customer. And that just gives them like a rough formula to figure out. So if a if a large customer says, we really care about this, and then we're like, my guess is that a lot of other customers, this is like sort of not a unique situation to you. A lot of other customers probably also care. You'll maybe go and confirm that. And then we also obviously take into account how far it is to build. And then based on that, like every individual, it's very unlikely you'll come up with two things that are the same output of that value function. And so I think that's how we'll be moving forward.
I have an even dumber one. Bitching ain't switching. Essentially, a lot of folks complain. Not every single change or problem is actually going to get them to change behavior, either hopping off your platform or actually accomplish the Super Mario thing that they're trying to accomplish at the end of the rainbow. So we need to figure out what is the very baseline feature, and oftentimes we can listen for that by figuring out what is their hell yes case study. What are they trying to accomplish? What's the problem they're trying to solve? What's going to get that user to be hell yes? If they're complaining about it, they can still accomplish the problem and still be complaining. That's the really confusing part. But essentially, they'll still buy if they're able to accomplish that one hell yes. That's from Rob Snyder. I am smart, but not that smart. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll add one more little thing to it that we factor in. These are all great answers. Yeah, it's really easy to be distracted by a customer, especially if they're a bigger customer. Like, oh, we really need this thing, or we're not gonna sign, or we're gonna leave. And I've made that mistake before of going and building that feature, and then it's distracting the whole team, and now they want like a new addition to it, and it just kind of becomes a little chase that just wasn't worth it, right? So I think it's really important to what is your roadmap for this feature? Is it something you're going to build in 6 months or a year? And maybe you're going to be smarter then, a bigger team able to handle it, and you're going to have 20 more of those customers ready to adopt it at that point. Then just wait, right? And kind of related to this, if you do get a feature request and it kind of starts to build incrementally towards where you're going to want to go anyway, that might actually be a good opportunity to sort of plan ahead a little bit. I think one of you were talking about longer term velocity. If you can see how that little feature addition now is going to actually build towards a larger feature later, then it's kind of a quick way. You can kind of kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. So we try to think about those things as well. Just try to maximize where you're currently at and what your current capability as a team is. Yeah.
I think those are all great insights. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for sharing all your insights. Thank you.